Hello and welcome back to another Stardust video, and in today's video I'm finally doing it. I'm doing the Expanse high tier list. In today's video I will be going over all Expanse tier 4s and tier 5s, which is max tier ships. There are 13 of them in total, and I am going to be very strict on this tier list. Some might go into F, some might go into S. You might disagree with me. This is my opinion of playing these ships. You can express your opinions in the comments below. But I will go in detail on each and individual ship, what I think about it, and where it'll be. To begin with, I shall start off with the Zenobia. The Zenobia is the tier 5 UN ship, which was like the flagship that carried the UN General Secretary, blah 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 blah. That's the law. It has armor. It has armor that gives the hits a 0.5 times negative buff on incoming fire. It doesn't have this armor around the core of the ship though, which is where auto aim will be aiming. So you do have to angle yourself. It has a very nice fast reloading railgun. I think it's like 10-15 seconds or so. So it's pretty fast compared to other railguns. However, it only has a 55 kilometer range. And considering the rest of your torpedoes have 70 kilometers, it means that you don't really use it unless an enemy gets in range of you. Which, in case they do, it's very potent. The missiles in general, they have the Tempest heavy torpedoes, and the Tempest torpedoes are very powerful, very fast, like every torpedo in Expanse. They also have a long reload. The same with the Lidar torpedoes. They are anti-stealth. They have a range of, I think it's like 33 kilometer lock-on range. So if a stealth ship gets in within 35 kilometers of those, when you fire those torpedoes, it'll auto-lock onto that ship. So it is a very good anti-stealth. But the problem is, it has heavy torps, Lidar torps, and nuclear torpedoes. And all of them have a really long reload. This ship has a massive reload time. And it's only really effective once all Lidar and heavy torps are loaded. If you fire the heavy torps by themselves, or the Lidars by themselves, most of them will be shot down. Or if they do manage to get there, they won't do enough damage as you want, because most of them will be shot down. So normally you fire all your missiles at once to get the full amount of damage and make sure that the most amount of missiles hit the target. The long reload is carried over by the fact that it has a 70 kilometer range, compared to it's the most ranged ship in the Expanse tech tree. Yes, other ships have 70 kilometer range, but no other ship has torpedoes which have all of them going to 70 kilometers. But because of its long reload, it's going to go into A tier. Next, we move on to Truman. The Truman is a I think it's classed as a battleship. The Truman is a tier 4. It's between the Leonidas and the Tripoli. There's not really much to say about it other than it is just another missile ship. A lot of these are missile ships. The railguns have a 58 kilometer range. It is pretty maneuverable. It is quite large though. It's the same size as the Tripoli, so it is a very large ship. Because it doesn't have as many missiles as maybe a tier 5, it's going to go into C tier. The next ship we're going for is the Tripoli. The Tripoli is basically an upgraded version of the Truman. And the Tripoli is a missile spammer. It spams the most missiles out of any Expanse ship. Do you mind if I call them missiles instead of torpedoes? I keep mixing up between the two because all Expanse ships only use torpedoes, they don't use missiles. But I switch between the two because every other tech tree uses missiles pretty much. But the Tripoli is a torpedo spammer. It spams torpedoes, it overwhelms the enemy's point defense. And you think it'd be really, really good and be like S tier, but it's not because it only has a maximum range of effective range of 60 kilometers, and to be effective to have everything firing, it's 55 kilometers. It is very maneuverable. It does not have access to flip and burn though. Keep that in mind. It does not have access to flip and burn, meaning if you need to turn around, You can't turn around as easily compared to other ships in the Expanse tree. It does have a short reload though for its torpedoes, and the torpedoes, you spam so many, you just overwhelm enemy point defense. They mostly fire from the front of the ship, so you don't have to worry about them going off to the side like the Donager. They go fire directly from front. Its point defense is alright for a Expanse ship, and for that it goes into B tier. The next ship is the Stealth Sea. This is a Martian stealth ship. It's one of the few stealth ships in-game. The United Nations, the Belt, they have no stealth ships. The Stealth Sea is one of the most powerful stealth ships in the game when it comes to damage in a single salvo. It fires to 12 nukes. They do 10,000 each. It fires 10 nukes. They do 12,000 each, other way around. It has a 40-second reload. It has a stealth time of 240 seconds. The only downside is, though, it can only drift while while cloaked. Meaning you have to point in the direction you're going in before you cloak, otherwise you'll drift off into where you don't want to be. It does have access to silent engine restart, where you can basically decloak without firing anything, without making a single sound. So if the enemy doesn't notice you and you're behind them, you can wait for the cloak time to recharge, fire off your nukes, and instantly cloak again. And the enemy will be clueless to what actually hit them. They know a Stealth Sea probably hits them if they know what the Stealth Sea is, but they don't know where you came from. I've had instances where I shoot down a guy in a carrier in like an Orion, he comes back in an Atlas, he tries to hunt me down, but he goes in the opposite direction of where I came from, because he doesn't know where I am, and so he's going on a wild goose chase, not finding me. However, the Stealth Sea is very situational. If you come across an enemy, if you kill an enemy and they just come back in a stealth ship, you are dead, pretty much. If they know where you are, if they're a competent player, they will kill you. Players in this game really hate stealth ships. If you kill them in their high tier ship, they will guaranteed come back in another ship to try and kill you. And for that, I'm putting it in D tier. The next ship is a Soccer Crow. I can't pronounce it correctly. I'm butchering it. It is a tier 4, like assault carrier sort of thing. It carries a bunch of marine dropships, and these have their own point defense. It's stuck between the Raptor and the Danager. It is alright. It does have access to one railgun. The railgun does decent amount of damage. It has access to missiles. It's really better at being a support ship than it is anything else. But compared to like the things like Truman, the dropships are really good at defending a fleet because they have access to point defense. If a ship gets too close, these dropships do a lot of damage. But it is rather large and it's rather slow, and for that it's going into C tier. The next ship we move on to is the Razanante refit. The Razanante refit was a limited ship. It went off sale, I think, like the 7th or 6th of August. It was meant to go off sale at the end of July, but people kept complaining they didn't quite have it yet, and so they kept it on, or they forget about it, which is something the developers do quite often in this game. The Razanante is pretty much a very annoying maneuverable ship that has insane point defense. It doesn't really have very high DPS or DPM. It's more of just a support ship or a PD ship. It is very enjoyable to play. It's very maneuverable. I do enjoy it. It's very fun to play, but it certainly isn't S tier material. I would say it goes into A tier. The next ship we move on to is the Peller. The Peller is a Raptor, a modified Raptor. The Raptor is a tier 3 version. The Peller is a modified Raptor that is Marco Inaros' flagship during the Free Navy. If you never watched Expanse, then you won't know what I'm talking about, but you have watched Expanse, then you do. I do recommend watching Expanse. It's a very good show. But Peller itself is a rate of fire booster. It has access to nukes, it has access to heavy torps and light torps. It is quite good at doing damage to lighter ships, that is Halo destroyers especially. It can take out those quite easily. It has one of the longest ranged rate of fire buffs. It's a 30-kilometer range. You can be in the middle of the map, but the people where in your spawn will be in your buff zone. and there's a 2x buff on fire rate of fire. This goes for like health healing ships. If they're healing someone, the rate of fire buffs them, and they do twice the healing. Is extremely good at healing like that. The only downside I have with the Pella is the fact that it is, in the end, a tier 4 modified Raptor. It is not a battleship, it's not a dreadnought, it's more like a light cruiser or something like that. The rate of fire buff is very nice, and for that, I'm putting it in B tier. The next ship we go on to is the Harman de Zhang. It is a modified Donager. It is the sister ship of the original Donager class battleship. The Harman, instead of having 2 railguns, it has 4 railguns, and it is one of the best snipers in the game, only because it doesn't have high DPS damage per minute, but what it does have is a lot of health compared to other snipers. Like, for example, the Veri, or what is now known as the E-Rod, does a lot of damage. It does like more than twice the damage as a Harman. But the E-Rod has 30,000 health, the Harman has 150,000. So you can see there is quite a difference between both of them. Overall, the railguns reload in 17 seconds. They all do 48,000 damage in one salvo. It does have access to heavy torps, so even light destroyers aren't safe. The railguns have quite high velocity. They do have a slow recharge time, but they have high velocity, so if you're good with aiming railguns, you can actually hit destroyers sometimes. I've had some very good shots with it, where I've just basically shot destroyers out of the sky with it. It is very enjoyable. It is very slow, though. It does have access to flip and burn. It does have access to that, but it is extremely slow. All right, it has 10 speed versus the Donager, which is 14 speed. It does like all expansion ships have the weak spot on the back, but they haven't patched that yet. I think it will be patched soon. It should be patched. I would put the Harman in A tier. It's not S tier because it loses a bunch of its missiles. It's slightly slower, but it's definitely not B tier because it is really good health for a sniper. The next ship on the list is the Gatamang. The Gatamang is the Free Navy or OPA's the first actual ship they made for their navy. It's all right. It's pretty quick. It doesn't have a lot of health. It is very maneuverable, but the fact that it doesn't have a lot of health makes it quite an easy target. It is pretty weak when it comes to brawling with other tier 5 ships, and for that, it's going into D tier. The next ship is the Donager battleship. The Donager battleship has some of the best missiles and torpedoes in the game, some really good point defense, is very quick, has access to flip and burn. This thing has 14 speed, by the way. It's massive in game. It's like 4,000 meters long. It is massive, and it has really good speed. It's really maneuverable. It has good rail guns. It has good missiles. It has everything you want in a missile battleship, and that is why I'm putting it in S tier. The next ship is the Baikul. The Baikul is a destroyer. It's one of the only destroyers in the entire Expanse tech tree. It is very maneuverable, has access to the rail guns. You can use your torpedoes to outrange most enemy ships. If the enemy starts charging you, you can get into the railgun range, and the railguns have very good reload and they're very easy to use. It is very maneuverable, it has quite good speed. It also has access to lead dart torpedoes, meaning it has anti-stealth capability, and so it is a very overall good destroyer. If in case the enemy starts overwhelming you when you're in the range of it with the rail guns, you can just retreat back, pull back, and use your missiles and your torpedoes, because your torpedoes have really good range. It's like 60 or 70 kilometers, can't quite remember which one, but it's right below the Zenobia in the tech tree. It is overall a very good and very fun ship to play. For that, I put it into B tier. The next ship is the Uman Ra. The Uman Ra is another stealth ship. Unlike every other stealth ship in the Expanse tech tree, it does not drift. it can move around freely when it's cloaked. It is very quick. It doesn't have a lot of health, only has about 30,000. It has access to what's called breaching pods. These breaching pods have a 10-kilometer range, and they do about 80,000 damage when in range. On top of the railguns, might do 25,000. On top of the missiles, which do an extra 20 to 30,000. So you can do about 150,000 damage in one salvo. The only problem is because these breaching pods have a 10-kilometer range, you pretty much have to be point blank with the enemy fleet or enemy ship to do anything, which is really, really hard to play, because if the enemy is, looking around them or being really attentive to their surroundings, you can't really do anything. And even so, because you're so close, they can just shoot guns into the random space until they find you. Oftentimes, I find you have to be like right behind the enemy ship, so their missiles can't lock on because you're too close, and so they miss. So the missiles miss you, because that is a new feature. Missiles and torpedoes can miss you now. The fact that it has to be so close to the enemy, I think they need a nerf there. It makes it very hard to play. One thing I did notice though is when you click to cloak, but you've already pressed the button to launch the breaching pods, you can cloak, and then the breaching pods will still fire because they have a charge time of like 7 seconds. And you have a cloak recharge of like 10 seconds. So you can actually cloak, and then the breaching pods will fire as you're cloaked, which you can get away with. But the fact that you have to be so close to the enemy for it to be effective. And most of the time when I play this, you might get 1 kill, but that's about it. You might even get any kills. If they're playing really beefy ships, you won't get anything. It's very hard to play. It definitely needs some change. It doesn't really deserve tier 4 if the breaching pods stay at 10 kilometers. Yes, they're very powerful, but there are other stealth ships out there that do just the same amount of damage, but can be at a much longer range than 10 kilometers. They can be at like 40 kilometers. And for that, it goes into E tier. The last ship we're going through is the 5G tower, the catamaran, the cancer tower, the tower that will give you unlimited amounts of cancer. It has the comms tower on the front, which has about it has a 50-kilometer range. It only does like 10,000 damage. It doesn't do a lot of damage, but it does have a fast reload, and it is a class as a quote-unquote super weapon. It has railguns that have a 45-kilometer range, and it has torpedoes which have a 55-kilometer range, meaning it technically has less range than something as a Tripoli and a lot less range than a Donager. Out of the big three, which is the Donager, the Tripoli, and this thing is the worst out of all three of them. I will put it into B tier. Most of the time I find it you sit at 55-kilometer range, you fire your torpedoes. If an enemy starts getting closer and closer to you, once they get a 50-kilometer range, you start using the comms tower as to lower their health. If they are still getting closer to you, by the time they get to 45 kilometers, then they're in range of the railguns, and now everything is firing. That's how I often play. And if an enemy starts getting close to like maybe 42.5 kilometers, I do then have access to flip and burn. It is one of the faster ships. It has 17 speed, which is very fast. It has access to flip and burn, so if they get to 42.5 kilometers, I tend to flip and burn and run back to 55 kilometers until I'm out of range of their ship again. But the fact that it doesn't have the best point defense, its point defense is more like heavy hitting point defense than it is like spamming everything everywhere sort of point defense. It also doesn't have a lot of health compared to other Expanse tier 5 ships. And it's very maneuverable, but there's no point being maneuverable if you're so large that you can't really move out of the way of something, like things like the Providence Mark II can do, which is spin round in circles and avoid enemy fire. This thing can't really do it because it's really large and really lengthy. But yeah, it goes into B tier. But yeah, that is the end of this video. If you liked the video, please remember to like and subscribe to my channel and like this video and check out my other videos. This has been mostly my opinion and me explaining my opinion on these ships. You don't have to take it completely seriously. Everyone has entitled to their own opinion on this. Please don't, flabbergast me in the comments saying, you're wrong because I think this, blah, 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 blah. Like, it is my opinion in the end. I will respect your opinion too. You respect mine. please keep the comments orderly. I know most of you do, so it's completely fine, but I know it gets a little heated when people talk about their favorite ships and, oh, my ship is better than yours, blah 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 blah. But yeah, I'll see you in the next video. It'll probably be on maybe like the Zenobia or another Expanse ship. But yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.